Let's begin with a betrayal so shocking it reshaped the course of Japanese history forever. Chapter 1. The Betrayal of Nobunaga at Honnoji. Oda Nobunaga was a man unlike any other in Japanese history. Known as the Demon King, he was feared and respected for his ruthless ambition, revolutionary tactics, and relentless drive to unify Japan under one rule. But on June 20, 1582, this larger-than-life figure met a fiery and tragic end, orchestrated not by a rival warlord or foreign invader, but by his own trusted general, Akechi Mitsuhide. The betrayal at Honnoji is one of the most infamous events in Japanese history. Nobunaga, having conquered much of central Japan, had taken refuge at the Honnoji Temple in Kyoto. He was unprepared for battle, confident in his position as one of the most powerful men in Japan. But it was at this moment of perceived strength that Mitsuhide struck. Historians still debate Mitsuhide's reasons for betrayal. Nobunaga's legendary temper and harsh leadership style could have played a role. Mitsuhide was reportedly humiliated on several occasions, including being berated during the siege of Tamba for a perceived lack of progress. Others argue the betrayal was strategic. Nobunaga's rapid rise had alienated powerful factions, and Mitsuhide may have seen his chance to gain favor with Nobunaga's rivals. Some theories even venture into conspiracy, suggesting Mitsuhide was a pawn in a larger plot involving external forces. But what of Mitsuhide's own feelings? Imagine the turmoil of a man standing on the brink of betrayal. Was he consumed by bitterness? Or was there hesitation, even guilt, as he led his forces toward Kyoto? It is said that before declaring his rebellion, he composed a brief poem. The enemy is at Honnoji. Was it a simple military declaration, or did it hint at his own realization of the enormity of his actions? Mitsuhide's humanity, his struggle with duty, resentment, and fear, makes his betrayal all the more haunting. On the night of June 21, 1582, he rallied his forces and surrounded the temple. As dawn broke, the assault began. Nobunaga, realizing there was no way out, chose to end his life in the way of the samurai. Witnesses recount his final moments. He donned ceremonial robes, sat calmly as the flames crept closer, and composed a short death poem. The poem, like Nobunaga himself, was lost to the fire, leaving behind only questions and ash. The scene at Honnoji was one of chaos and destruction. The temple, once a place of peace, became a smoldering ruin. Smoke billowed over Kyoto as news of Nobunaga's death spread like wildfire. The implications were immediate and profound. Nobunaga, a man who had revolutionized Japanese warfare by introducing firearms and disciplined infantry tactics, was gone. His dream of unifying Japan was left in limbo, and the power vacuum he left behind threatened to plunge the nation into further chaos. What made Nobunaga so transformative? Unlike many warlords of his time, he embraced innovation. Nobunaga was among the first to adopt firearms on a large scale, leveraging arquebuses imported by Portuguese traders to decimate enemy forces. At the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, he famously deployed rotating lines of gunners to break a cavalry charge, a revolutionary tactic that marked a turning point in Japanese warfare. Beyond the battlefield, he promoted trade, encouraged Christianity to weaken Buddhist factions that opposed him, and worked to dismantle the traditional feudal structures that hindered centralized power. His reforms were bold, often ruthless, but undeniably visionary. For Mitsuhide, the betrayal was a triumph that quickly turned to tragedy. After declaring himself the ruler of Nobunaga's territories, he quickly faced opposition. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, one of Nobunaga's most loyal generals, moved with unparalleled speed to avenge his fallen lord. Within 13 days, Hideyoshi had gathered an army and defeated Mitsuhide at the Battle of Yamazaki. Mitsuhide's death at the hands of vengeful peasants as he fled marked the swift and ignominious end of his rebellion. He would forever be remembered as the 13-day shogun. Even centuries later, the events at Honnoji continue to fascinate historians and enthusiasts alike. Was Mitsuhide's betrayal the act of a desperate man pushed too far, or part of a larger conspiracy involving rival factions? Some even speculate whether Mitsuhide, often seen as the villain, was attempting to end Nobunaga's tyrannical rule for the greater good of Japan. These unanswered questions make the story of Honnoji not just a pivotal moment in history, but also a compelling moral puzzle. What drove Akechi Mitsuhide to betray his master? personal resentment, political strategy, or something even more complex. The betrayal at Honnoji wasn't merely an act of personal resentment. It was a turning point in Japanese history. Nobunaga's death set off a chain reaction, forcing his remaining generals to vie for power. Hideyoshi would ultimately rise to prominence, continuing Nobunaga's mission of unification. But the memory of Honnoji loomed large, a testament to the fragile balance between loyalty and ambition in the Sengoku period. In the end, Nobunaga's fiery demise serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of ambition, unchecked by trust. This story, like that of Mitsuhide's betrayal, raises enduring questions about the nature of power and loyalty, questions that resonate even in modern times. Had Nobunaga lived, could he have unified Japan under his banner? Or would his ruthlessness have ultimately led to his downfall? As loyalty and betrayal blurred the lines between friend and foe during the Sengoku period, another force moved silently in the shadows, wielding no banners or honor, only secrecy and death. Chapter 2. Shinobi and Military Espionage. While the samurai are celebrated for their rigid code of honor, another group operated in the margins of Sengoku society, far removed from the battlefield's glaring sunlight. The shinobi, or ninjas, were masters of espionage, sabotage, and assassination. Their work wasn't a clash of swords, but a war of whispers, deception, and calculated destruction. The word ninja itself evokes an air of myth. Stories of shadowy figures scaling castle walls, vanishing into the night, and outwitting entire armies have shaped popular imagination. But who were the shinobi, really? Far from mythical superheroes, shinobi were a network of highly skilled operatives, often trained in secretive communities like Iga and Koga. These clans, isolated in mountainous regions, developed the techniques that defined ninjutsu, the art of stealth and subterfuge. The Sengoku period's political chaos created fertile ground for espionage. As daimyo vied for dominance, shinobi were indispensable tools in their arsenals. They served a variety of functions, from gathering intelligence on enemy movements to sowing discord within rival factions. Unlike the samurai, whose battles were governed by visible displays of power, shinobi thrived in ambiguity. Their existence blurred the boundaries of warfare, redefining what it meant to fight and win. For example, Tokugawa Ieyasu, the future unifier of Japan, owed his survival to the shinobi. During his escape from the siege of Oda Nobunaga's forces at Hamamatsu Castle, Ieyasu reportedly employed Iga shinobi to guide him through treacherous mountain passes. Without their intimate knowledge of the terrain and mastery of stealth, Ieyasu's path to power might have ended before it began. But for the shinobi, this work came at a cost. They lived precarious lives, constantly risking capture and execution if discovered. Their missions required complete anonymity. A shinobi who failed was not just a liability, but a danger to the employer who hired them. These operatives often lived as outcasts, vilified for the very skills that made them indispensable. Imagine the internal conflict of serving a daimyo, knowing that your success would bring no glory and your failure would invite disgrace, or worse, death. Shinobi didn't rely solely on physical prowess. They were strategists, craftsmen, and masters of deception. Their arsenal included a variety of tools designed to exploit their environment and confuse their enemies. Smoke bombs, for example, weren't merely theatrical. They were used to obscure vision and facilitate escape. Shinobi also utilized specialized footwear with split-toe designs for better grip and silent movement, as well as collapsible ladders for scaling fortifications. One of the most iconic tools was the kunai, a multi-purpose implement that could be used as a climbing aid, pry bar, or weapon. Similarly, they were known for their use of shuriken, small throwing stars or blades, though these were more distraction devices than lethal weapons. Beyond tools, shinobi relied on psychological warfare. Disinformation campaigns were common, spreading false rumors or forging documents to create mistrust within enemy ranks. In one famous account, shinobi infiltrated a castle disguised as merchants, setting fires that caused chaos and ultimately facilitated the castle's capture. But these tactics weren't just clever. They changed the very nature of warfare. The Sengoku period saw a shift from battles of brute strength to wars won through strategy and psychological manipulation. Shinobi proved that wars could be fought and won in the shadows, often without a single sword being drawn. This shift not only altered how daimyo approached their conflicts, but also influenced future military strategies across the world. Did the shinobi redefine warfare by prioritizing strategy over brute force? Or were their methods simply adaptations to a chaotic era? Unlike the samurai, shinobi didn't adhere to a rigid code like Bushido. Their loyalty lay solely with their employer, and their methods were judged by their outcomes. This pragmatic approach made them both feared and reviled. While daimyo hired them in secret, the shinobi's work was often disavowed publicly. The disdain for their methods gave rise to the stereotype of the ninja as dishonorable or villainous. But in truth, their skills were indispensable during the Sengoku period's constant upheaval. Were their clandestine actions dishonorable, or were they an essential part of surviving in a time of relentless power struggles? However, this lack of a formalized code didn't mean shinobi were without principles. The Iga and Koga clans, for instance, passed down their techniques and values across generations, emphasizing discipline, loyalty to the mission, and adaptability. Their training wasn't just physical, it included psychology, survival tactics, and even chemistry, as they developed poisons and explosives. For shinobi, honor wasn't about grand displays of loyalty, it was about quiet dedication to the mission. Their anonymity was both their strength and their curse, ensuring that their contributions would often remain in the shadows. The shinobi's impact on history extends beyond individual missions. Entire strategies were built around their involvement. During the siege of Osaka in 1614, shinobi were employed by both Tokugawa forces and their enemies to infiltrate and sabotage. Iga shinobi played a critical role in undermining the Toyotomi clan's defenses, tipping the scales in favor of the Tokugawa shogunate. Another example is the assassination of Uesugi Kenshin's retainer in the midst of a key battle. While the specifics are debated, accounts suggest that shinobi may have been used to infiltrate enemy lines, weakening morale and creating openings for decisive strikes. These missions weren't merely tactical, they shaped the course of the Sengoku period itself. Shinobi's ability to destabilize entire armies with minimal resources demonstrated the power of strategy over brute force, paving the way for a more nuanced understanding of warfare. The end of the Sengoku period marked the decline of the shinobi's prominence. As Japan entered the Tokugawa era and the country experienced relative stability, the need for covert operatives diminished. Samurai culture regained its dominance, and the shinobi faded into obscurity, their techniques surviving only in secret traditions and oral histories. What was once an indispensable tool of war became a relic of a chaotic past. However, their legacy persisted in folklore and legend, transforming the shinobi into symbols of mystery and cunning. From kabuki theater to modern films, the ninja's image has become a cultural touchstone, far removed from the pragmatic operatives of the Sengoku period. While the shinobi operated in shadows, wielding stealth and strategy, the Sengoku period's most visible atrocities were often acts of sheer brutality. Few events exemplify this better than the destruction of Mount Hiei, a massacre that blurred the line between ambition and savagery. Chapter 3. Mass monastic violence, the destruction of Mount Hiei. The Sengoku period is often remembered for its bloody battles, cunning strategies, and larger-than-life warlords. But one of its darkest moments didn't take place on a battlefield. It unfolded in the sacred halls of Mount Hiei, home to the Enryakuji Monastery, a place revered as a center of Buddhist learning and spiritual refuge. In 1571, Oda Nobunaga ordered the complete destruction of Mount Hiei, unleashing a massacre that left thousands dead and the once holy mountain engulfed in flames. Mount Hiei, perched on the outskirts of Kyoto, wasn't just a spiritual haven, it was a political powerhouse. The Enryakuji Monastery, founded in the 8th century, was the epicenter of the Tendai sect of Buddhism and held immense influence over Japanese society. Monks from Mount Hiei often acted as power brokers, leveraging their religious authority to sway daimyo and even the imperial court. But by the Sengoku period, the once peaceful Tendai monks had become entangled in the chaos of war. The Sohei, or warrior monks from Mount Hiei, were a formidable military force, intervening in conflicts and allying with clans opposed to Nobunaga's rise. For Nobunaga, who sought to unify Japan under his rule, Mount Hiei represented a significant obstacle. not only because of its alliances, but because of the monastery's ability to rally opposition through its spiritual influence. Nobunaga's frustration with the Tendai monks reached its breaking point after they supported his enemies during his campaign against the Asakura and Azai clans. From his perspective, the monastery was no longer a religious institution, but a strategic threat that needed to be eliminated. In the autumn of 1571, Nobunaga's forces surrounded Mount Hiei. Unlike typical sieges that involved prolonged standoffs or negotiations, Nobunaga's orders were chillingly direct. No mercy. His army, numbering tens of thousands, marched up the mountain, torching temples, homes, and fortifications. The warrior monks fought valiantly, but they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Eyewitness accounts describe the scene as apocalyptic. The flames consumed centuries-old wooden structures, filling the air with thick black smoke that darkened the skies over Kyoto. Screams echoed through the forests as monks, civilians, and children were slaughtered indiscriminately. By the end of the siege, it is estimated that over 20,000 people had been killed. What made the destruction even more shocking was Nobunaga's refusal to spare anyone, including women, children, and the elderly. His justification was simple. If even one survivor escaped, they could rekindle resistance. Nobunaga's actions weren't just about defeating an enemy. They were about sending a message that no one, not even a revered religious institution, could stand in the way of his ambition. Mount Hiei was left in ruins, its temples reduced to ash and its once thriving monastic community annihilated. The Tendai sect, which had wielded so much power for centuries, was effectively dismantled. For years, Mount Hiei stood as a stark symbol of Nobunaga's ruthlessness and his willingness to destroy anything or anyone that opposed him. But the destruction of Mount Hiei wasn't just a blow to the Tendai monks. It had a profound impact on Japanese society as a whole. The monastery had been a beacon of culture, education, and spiritual guidance. Its destruction created a cultural and moral vacuum, with many questioning whether Nobunaga's vision for unification was worth such a horrific cost. The destruction of Mount Hiei highlights the paradox of Oda Nobunaga's legacy. On one hand, he was a visionary leader who revolutionized Japanese warfare and governance, laying the groundwork for Japan's eventual unification. On the other hand, he was a figure of unrelenting brutality, willing to commit atrocities in the name of progress. Was Nobunaga's assault on Mount Hiei an act of necessary pragmatism, or was it the unchecked savagery of a man consumed by ambition? Historians continue to debate this question. Some argue that Nobunaga's actions, while extreme, were a calculated move to eliminate a powerful political threat. Others view the massacre as a stain on his legacy, a moment when ambition overruled humanity. The destruction of Mount Hiei had far-reaching consequences beyond the immediate loss of life. It marked a turning point in the Sengoku period, signaling the diminishing power of religious institutions in Japanese politics. Nobunaga's actions weakened the influence of militant Buddhist sects across the country, paving the way for the centralization of power under his rule and later, the Tokugawa shogunate. Did Nobunaga's destruction of Mount Hiei mark the necessary end of religious interference in politics, or was it an unforgivable act of cultural annihilation? Yet the massacre also left scars that would linger for generations. The collective memory of Mount Hiei became a cautionary tale about the cost of ambition and the fragility of cultural institutions during times of war. For many, it symbolized the dangers of placing political power above human and spiritual values. Could Nobunaga have secured his position without resorting to such devastating tactics? Or was total destruction his only option? Today, Mount Hiei has been rebuilt, its temples restored as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But the memory of its destruction remains an integral part of its story. The destruction of Mount Hiei forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of power and progress. It challenges us to consider whether the pursuit of a greater vision can ever justify the suffering it inflicts. As we move through the Sengoku period's darkest moments, Mount Hiei stands as a reminder of how easily humanity's loftiest ambitions can descend into barbarity. While battles raged and temples burned, not all conflicts during the Sengoku period were fought with swords. Among the political intrigues of the era, one practice stood out for its blend of strategy and emotional weight. 4. The exchange of hostages. In the chaotic Sengoku period, alliances were as fragile as the autumn leaves, shifting with the winds of opportunity. Daimyo, the warlords who ruled their respective domains, often formed temporary alliances to secure their borders or achieve mutual goals. But with trust in short supply, how could these agreements be guaranteed? The answer lay in the deeply personal and highly strategic practice of hostage exchanges. Hostages, often young children or close family members of daimyo, became the living embodiments of political agreements. Far from being prisoners in a dungeon, these hostages were frequently treated with respect, educated, and integrated into the court life of their host. Yet beneath the surface of civility lay the ever-present threat of betrayal, with the hostage's life hanging precariously in the balance. The exchange of hostages wasn't unique to Japan, but the Sengoku period elevated it to a fine art. In an era where betrayals and shifting loyalties were the norm, hostages provided a tangible guarantee of an alliance. If one daimyo broke the agreement, the hostage could be executed, publicly shaming the traitor and dissuading others from following suit. Hostages were often chosen for their symbolic value. A daimyo might send a son, daughter, or sibling to represent his commitment to the agreement. This wasn't a decision made lightly. It was a calculated risk, weighing the benefits of the alliance against the emotional toll and potential loss. Take, for example, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who as a child was sent as a hostage to the Imagawa clan. While in captivity, Ieyasu was educated in military and political strategies, forming connections that would later serve him well. His experience underscores how hostage-taking wasn't merely a tool of coercion, it was also a means of grooming future leaders and fostering relationships. Hostages were usually treated as honored guests, reflecting the importance of maintaining the alliance. They lived in the castles of their host families, receiving education in governance, martial arts, and etiquette. In some cases, they were even married into the host family, further solidifying ties between the clans. Yet the psychological strain of being a hostage was immense. These individuals lived under constant uncertainty, knowing their survival hinged on the political decisions of their family or host. Imagine the emotional burden of a young child, torn from their home and family, trying to navigate the courtly intrigues of a foreign domain, while knowing they might be killed if their father or brother broke the alliance. One notable example is Toyotomi Hideyoshi's treatment of hostages during his campaign for unification. Hideyoshi frequently demanded hostages from his allies and enemies alike, ensuring their loyalty through both respect and fear. He was known for treating hostages well, but the underlying threat of retribution loomed large, keeping his rivals in check. While hostages were symbols of trust, they were also pawns in a dangerous game. Daimyo could use hostages to manipulate their rivals or test the limits of alliances. For instance, a daimyo might send a less important relative as a hostage, calculating that the host would hesitate to harm someone of lesser strategic value. On the other hand, a daimyo might deliberately send their heir, demonstrating an unshakable commitment to the alliance. Hostage exchanges also played a role in espionage. Hostages often became de facto spies, observing the political and military operations of their host family and relaying this information back to their own clan. This dual role added another layer of complexity to the practice, as hosts had to balance hospitality with vigilance. Did hostage exchanges truly strengthen alliances, or did they expose the fragile nature of Sengoku-era trust? Despite the layers of civility surrounding hostage exchanges, they were often marked by heartbreak and betrayal. Alliances were broken, and hostages paid the ultimate price. One of the most infamous examples involved the siege of Odawara in 1590. The Hojo clan, refusing to surrender to Toyotomi Hideyoshi, faced the execution of their hostages, including women and children, as punishment for their defiance. Such acts of violence weren't uncommon and underscored the fragility of Sengoku-era politics. The very practice designed to ensure loyalty could become a weapon of retaliation, with hostages serving as both victims and symbols of the era's brutal pragmatism. The practice of hostage exchanges reveals much about the Sengoku period's political culture. It was a world where personal relationships were both a strength and a liability, where trust was transactional, and where survival often meant sacrificing one's closest ties. Hostages were the ultimate bargaining chips, embodying the precarious balance between power and vulnerability. The legacy of hostage exchanges extended beyond the Sengoku period. It influenced the diplomatic practices of the Tokugawa shogunate, where family members of daimyo were required to reside in Edo, modern-day Tokyo, as a form of political control. This system, known as Sankin-kotai, echoed the hostage-taking practices of the Sengoku era, demonstrating how deeply the period's strategies shaped Japan's political evolution. Today, the tales of these individuals, young heirs, daughters, and siblings, offer a lens into the complexities of Sengoku-era diplomacy. They challenge us to consider how far we would go to secure peace, and whether such peace, built on the backs of the vulnerable, can ever truly last. What must it have been like for a young child to grow up in the shadow of political uncertainty, knowing their life hung by a thread? As alliances were secured with hostages and battles raged on the front lines, one often overlooked force in the Sengoku period's drama was women. Far from passive bystanders, they were political pawns, cultural anchors, and in some cases, fierce warriors who wielded swords alongside men. Final chapter: the role of women as political pawns and warriors. The Sengoku period is often depicted as a time dominated by men, daimyo commanding armies, samurai upholding honor, and shinobi lurking in the shadows. But woven into the fabric of this era were the stories of women who played pivotal roles in shaping its course. While many were used as pawns in the grand political chessboard of alliances, others defied expectations, stepping into roles of leadership in combat when necessity demanded it. In the Sengoku period, marriages were rarely about love. For the daughters of daimyo, marriage was a political tool, a way to cement alliances, secure peace, or gain leverage over rivals. These women were often sent to marry powerful allies or enemies, binding families together in fragile pacts. One of the most notable examples is Lady Oichi, the younger sister of Oda Nobunaga. Oichi's marriages were critical to Nobunaga's political strategy. First, she married Azai Nagamasa, a daimyo whose alliance with Nobunaga was short-lived. When the Azai turned against Nobunaga, Oichi found herself caught between loyalty to her brother and her husband. After Nagamasa's defeat and death, Oichi returned to her brother's side, later marrying Shibata Katsue, another of Nobunaga's generals. Through her life, Oichi's role as a political bridge underscored the sacrifices and complexities faced by women in this era. The story of Hosokawa Gracia provides another poignant example. As the daughter of Akechi Mitsuhide, the man who betrayed Nobunaga, Gracia's life was marked by tragedy. Following her father's death, she married into the Hosokawa clan and converted to Christianity, becoming one of Japan's first Christian converts. During the siege of Osaka, Gracia chose death rather than risk being used as a political pawn, commanding her servants to kill her as the enemy approached. Her faith, courage, and defiance have made her a lasting symbol of personal agency in a time of political turmoil. Beyond politics, women in the Sengoku period played a vital role as cultural and domestic anchors. While men were off fighting wars, women managed estates, oversaw finances, and ensured the survival of their households. These responsibilities required intelligence, resilience, and leadership skills that often went unacknowledged in historical records. Women also served as educators and transmitters of culture, teaching their children the values of loyalty, discipline, and honor. The wives of samurai often became the keepers of family traditions, ensuring that their households remained stable amidst the chaos of war. Were women truly powerless in a system that used them as pawns, or did they wield quiet but undeniable influence in shaping alliances and culture? An iconic figure in this regard is Nene, the wife of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Known for her wisdom and administrative abilities, Nene managed Hideyoshi's household during his campaigns, maintaining order and providing strategic advice. Her influence extended beyond the domestic sphere, as she often mediated disputes and served as a trusted confidante to her husband. While many women of the Sengoku period were relegated to domestic or political roles, some took up arms, challenging the expectations of their time. The Onnobu geisha, or female samurai, were trained in combat to defend their homes and families. These women were often the last line of defense during sieges, wielding naginata, polearms, and other weapons with skill and determination. One of the most legendary Onnobu geisha is Tomoe Gozen, though her story predates the Sengoku period. Her legacy, however, inspired generations of women during this turbulent era. The legacy of Sengoku women extends far beyond their lifetimes. Their stories continue to inspire modern Japan, reflected in literature, theater, and film. Figures like Lady Oichi and Kaihime have been immortalized in kabuki plays, novels, and television dramas, where their lives are portrayed as a blend of tragedy and heroism. Even the cultural roles played by women, such as Nene's stewardship of Hideyoshi's household, influence modern interpretations of Japanese heritage. The principles of loyalty, resilience, and dedication that these women embodied are still celebrated in family traditions and social values today. The role of women during the Sengoku period reveals a striking duality. On one hand, they were often powerless, used as bargaining chips in a male-dominated world. On the other hand, they exhibited remarkable agency, stepping into roles of leadership, strategy, and combat when circumstances demanded it. Today, their legacy challenges us to reevaluate historical narratives that often overlook their contributions. These women teach us that power isn't always wielded with a sword, and resilience can be just as transformative as ambition. As the Sengoku period drew to a close, the contributions of women, warriors, and hostages alike left an indelible mark on Japanese history. Their stories, intertwined with the rise and fall of warlords, continue to inspire and challenge our understanding of this turbulent era. Through the blood-soaked battlefields and shifting alliances, the stories of the Sengoku period reveal much about the nature of power, loyalty, and human resilience. From the betrayal of Oda Nobunaga at Honnoji to the clandestine operations of the shinobi, from the devastation of Mount Hiei to the fragile alliances forged through hostage exchanges, each chapter of this era offers a glimpse into the ambitions and struggles of those who sought to carve their names into history. But the Sengoku period wasn't defined solely by warlords and warriors. It was also shaped by those who lived in the margins, the hostages whose lives became political bargaining chips, the women who navigated a male-dominated world with courage and ingenuity, and the monks whose monasteries became battlegrounds. Their stories remind us that history isn't just about victors. It's about the countless individuals whose lives, sacrifices, and resilience shaped the world we live in today. As the Sengoku period gave way to the relative peace of the Tokugawa shogunate, many of its practices, values, and innovations endured. The centralization of power, the use of firearms, the strategies of espionage, and even the lessons of loyalty and betrayal influenced the fabric of Japanese society for centuries. Yet, the scars of the Sengoku period, the loss of cultural treasures, the displacement of people, and the countless lives lost, served as a sobering reminder of the cost of ambition. Today, the Sengoku period continues to captivate the imagination, inspiring countless works of art, literature, and media. Its larger-than-life figures, dramatic conflicts, and profound moral dilemmas remain a source of fascination and reflection. The stories of this turbulent era challenge us to consider our own values. What are we willing to sacrifice for power? What does loyalty truly mean? And how do we honor the voices of those who history often overlooks? In the end, the Sengoku period stands as a testament to the duality of human nature. It was a time of unimaginable violence and boundless creativity, of devastating loss and enduring hope. It reminds us that even in the darkest chapters of history, there are lessons to be learned, stories to be told, and legacies to be honored. If you found these stories as fascinating as we did, join us for more deep dives into the untold chapters of history. Subscribe to our channel and be a part of a community that values not just learning, but uncovering the lessons hidden in the past. Your support helps us bring these stories to life, stories of warriors, visionaries, and the ordinary people who shaped extraordinary times. Don't miss the next chapter. Hit that subscribe button, and let's keep exploring history together.